Governor and Madam President, it's a pleasure to be here today. I'll be brief because I think I'm standing in the way of some fantastic announcements. Today, I'd like to talk very briefly about what I think is a very important tension when thinking about cybersecurity and cyberterrorism. It's the tension between surveillance on the one hand and security on the other. These two legitimate policy aims often come into conflict and tension when we think about cyberspace. They are particularly acute and drawn out when we think about how we combat and confront cyberterrorism. This is an area of current policy debate in the US and across the globe, and I think it's only going to increase in importance in the years ahead. So when I think of cyberterrorism, it might be useful first to think about definitions. It can be defined in many different sorts of ways, but I think there's two sort of general bins that I use. The first is to think about the use of cyberspace as a means of supporting terrorist organizations. Okay, that's one way of thinking about it. The second way that I think about cyberterrorism is thinking about terrorist attacks that are conducted through cyberspace. So cyberspace is the vector, the means through which the attack is actually propagated. Now, these are both very important. The first way is something that we're confronting now, thinking about how terrorist organizations are currently using cyberspace as a way of supporting their operations. So this might be thinking about the use of social media as a recruitment tool, the use of the internet as a platform to spread ideology, the use of network technology as a way of organizing and projecting power and logistics. Even more important, perhaps, is the use of cybercrime as a way to support and fund terrorist activities. Now, these are activities that are, for the most part, that first bin, that are already occurring, they're already going on. Terrorist organizations, like all organizations, are using the global, low-cost, ubiquitous availability of digital technologies to improve how they operate in the world. Thinking how we counter these movements is very difficult. What I'd like to focus on in my remarks today, very briefly, is that second category, thinking about the likelihood and the difficulty of confronting attacks that occur through cyberspace. This is using cyberspace as a means of conducting terrorist attack. As we move, as was mentioned by a few of the earlier speakers, towards what is known as the Internet of Things, when not only the phones in our pockets, but the toasters, the refrigerators, and the thermostats in our homes have IP addresses, the attack space for cyber attacks is rapidly increasing. Okay, we're becoming an embedded society. At the moment, the capabilities for severe attacks like those that the speaker previously described against the electric power grid, at the moment, the capabilities for those sorts of attacks really only exist for nation states and their proxies. That's the good news. Unfortunately, we have seen some significant events. Stuxnet, as was mentioned, the attack against Saudi Aramco, the sophisticated attacks several years ago against Estonia, which was mentioned by one of our, the second speaker, I believe. All of these appear to be the work of nation states or state-backed proxies. For the moment, very sophisticated attacks appear to be out of the reach of terrorist organizations. That's the good news. Now, the bad news is the future might look very different. As we think about how the terrorist threat is going to evolve, it is a real concern that tomorrow we're going to have to confront the possibility that non-state actors have access to sophisticated cyber weapons. So as we think about now how to confront this menace or possible menace, we have to think about how to balance security and surveillance. Lawful surveillance is, of course, vital to thinking about how we disrupt, degrade terrorist organizations. Collecting information about terrorist groups, their plans and operations is incredibly important. But at the same time, we want to promote cybersecurity, making sure that we have the good hygiene that's been mentioned throughout the talks today, making sure that technologies that provide the foundations for cyberspace are secure. That's also important. Now, the key tension between these two aims is acute. At a very basic level, the tools that we want to use and develop and the tools that we are using and developing to conduct surveillance also jeopardizes our own security. They make the technologies that we rely upon fundamentally insecure and open to exploitation. At the same time, as we promote cybersecurity, as we support the adoption of strong cryptography and encryption, it jeopardizes and risks degrading our ability to collect information and intelligence about terrorist activities. So here we see the tension between surveillance on the one hand and security on the other. This tension is most acute in two domains. The first is encryption policy, and the second has to do with what are known as 0 days or O days. If we promote strong cryptography and improve the security of communications both for us and our enemies, we are going to enhance cybersecurity. However, this also limits our ability to conduct surveillance. Terrorist communications, well, as the phrase is sometimes known, go dark. However, if we work to undermine and subvert strong cryptography standards, as has been publicly charged, we threaten not only we not only increase our ability to collect information about terrorist organizations, we also risk opening ourselves up to new vectors of attack. We see the same tension reappear when we think about how to use newly discovered but previously unknown software vulnerabilities. These are what are known as, or referred to sometimes as, 0 days or O days. These vulnerabilities are incredibly important. They can be seen as problems to be fixed or resources to be exploited. As we see them as problems, the idea is to quickly create patches to make sure that our systems are protected and secure from hackers. However, if we view them as resources to exploit, we see them as opportunities to conduct new surveillance operations and develop new cyber tools and offensive capabilities. So the tension really is, do we fix the bug or do we let it exist and grow? There's many, these are just two examples, but there's many over and over again that we see surveillance and security are in tension. Thinking about how we reconcile these two important and legitimate aims is going to determine in a very serious way how we confront the growing threat on the horizon of cyberterrorism. I'll leave my remarks there. Thank you.